Just when you thought you had enough emergency pods, we're coming at you with another one. DK Metcalf on the move. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler. I had hopes that maybe they could get back around the bargaining table, guys, to work this thing out after the Geno thing and the stuff you heard that, hey, maybe the chemistry wasn't good, so let's get back down here and work this out. But man, like, we just broke the Geno stuff, digested that, worked that out, and now this. DK's on the move. Not as surprising because obviously we heard about there was a trade request from DK's camp last week, but now it's official. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler. Guys, your reactions?
Mookie, you're the guest. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm practically a third co-host because I've been on every emergency pod this week. We've done 4 shows this week.
Well, plus Pulse of the Hot, yeah.
Yeah, plus. So for this week, I mean, Sunday is technically the start of a new week, and it's the start of a new era for the Seattle Seahawks, that's for sure. That Metcalf got dealt, not surprised after the trade request, because our hint was when woke up Sunday morning and Diana Rossini reports the price tag for DK lower, they'd be willing to take a second-round pick instead of their initial first and third-round pick request. Now, of course, it's natural in the NFL and all sports. You want to start high with your negotiating. This is the price we're going for. And then you go a little lower when the market is not interested in your initial offer. So to get a second-round pick, and I don't really care about the 6th and 7th-round pick swap, like that's immaterial. So the second-round pick means that Seattle's got picks 50 and 52 in the draft. So they've got 2 close to each other that you think they might use one of them to trade, whether in the draft or for a player. It's obviously sucks to see Metcalf go, at least for me, because I know there are a lot of others who are elated to see DK go and are the complete opposite of Ryan and think that, Metcalf is just one of the worst and he's not any good, even though he's been one of the most productive receivers in Seahawks history. I know there have been some frustrations with him. You can't deny that he, at his best, was really, really good for this offense. But the Steelers is an interesting team. I didn't have them on my radar, really, especially when they didn't take Ayuk last year, or I guess, the Ayuk trade didn't happen. They were looking at receivers, but I didn't think about them potentially being a Metcalf option. So we wonder, is Russell Wilson going to stay with Pittsburgh? Is he going to resign? Is Sam Darnold going to go to Pittsburgh knowing that, they've got DK now? So there's so many different angles we could explore here as far as Metcalf and Pittsburgh. The contract is something because it's 4 years and $132 million. It's listed originally as 5 years, 150, but it's $18 million for the last year of his deal. And then the other 4 years is the new deal, 4 years for 132. So if you do your math, that's $33 million a year. So that's AJ Brown money. I can understand John Schneider not wanting to give AJ Brown money to DK Metcalf. So Seattle is not, again, they're not tearing everything down in terms of the entire roster, but they are absolutely tearing it down on the offensive side of the ball. That means your top 2 or your top 3 receivers are gone. You've got Geno gone. You've got maybe Noah Fant gone, or maybe he stays because you can't just get rid of everybody. It seems they let Noah stay on the last year of his deal. Probably your left guard is gone in Laken Tomlinson. Maybe you're going to have a new center, new right guard. So there's a lot of change coming on the offensive side of the ball, in addition to the new coaching staff already here. But yeah, this is John just hitting the button. He hit the red button. And it's not a 2 timeline thing. We're not splitting the center lane anymore. They are picking a path. Now, this could be a path directly into what looks like a tunnel, but it's really just the Roadrunner painting it for Wile E. Coyote. Or it could be the path to new contention in the long term. This is very much, to me, like they're not focusing constantly on 1-year increments. Like we're only focusing on 2023 and trying to win now, and 2024 and trying to win now. They could still win and be competitive in 2025, but their replacements, meaning Geno and DK and Lockett, their replacements down the line are not this one-off thing. It is focusing on multiple seasons.
Yeah, this to me is they have finally addressed kind of the elephant in the room and decided, hey, look, like it's not working. This direction isn't working anymore. We're not able to get out, as like Ryan has said numerous times, like you got to get out of this purgatory of being mediocre. And you constantly keep saying, we want to go after championships. We're contending. Well, you were kind of doing it in 2 different ways because you weren't really putting all the chips in to contend, and you weren't willing to address the things you needed to contend. Now they've done exactly what you said, because they've ripped this Band-Aid off and gone, we're not good enough to contend. We need to reassess, reset this offense. The defense, it's fine. Like the defense, keep adding to it, keep just tweaking it, get into what Mike McDonald wants. But this offense needed a full reset. You look at the entire offensive staff they brought in, the veterans there that they brought in, and Dennison and all these other guys they brought in, John Benton. You bring in Clint Kubiak. You have a vision now of how you want this offense to work with your defense. Now they're going and getting that done.
Yeah, I think, for me, I mean, I know I've talked a lot about DK on the show, and I mean, I still like the guy a lot. I think he's, like I mentioned on the show, I think it was Pulse of the Hawks, like, he's not AJ Brown, but I don't think he's as far away as some people think. And inflation's real in the NFL. So, this contract, you're paying him 33. I mean, in a couple of years, it might look like a bargain, and depends what he does in Pittsburgh. And there's a lot of unknowns there as well, as far as, who's even going to throw the football. But for us, I mean, you look at, you free up another, close to $11 million in cap space, right? Like Bryce, you're saying, they're cutting ties here. I mean, it was a trade request, so it wasn't like they just went out on their own and did it. But at the same time, two huge pieces for the last few years here are gone. And for me, the personal, love for the receiver aside, or whatever you want to call it, if I'm looking at this team as a whole for the Hawks, man, like I'm optimistic, man. There's a lot of knee-jerk reactions I find in amongst the fan base, like when Gino's gone and now DK, it's like, what are we going to do? It's like, I mean, this just happened. Like, they're going to fill the spots. Now, how they do it, that's what we could talk about. But I just don't get it, because, these guys, it has been a middling team. It's been not a very good offense. So to me, both guys can be replaceable. The offense can look a lot different. Kubiak's got a whole new scheme anyways. So, like we mentioned, does he fit exactly what he wants? Yes, he's a big physical, mismatch. But again, your offense, when it's all said and done, we have free agency next week, the draft coming up. This offense, when it's all said and done, going to camp, we could sit back and be like, this looks good. So I just think the knee-jerk stuff, like, let's just wait this out and see what happens. There's a lot of things. Bryce, a couple days from now, free agency, like we talked about, we really think now, especially with all this money, like, I mean, we thought even before the DK and the Gino move that they were going to address at least a center because of the emphasis Kubiak puts on that position, and you need somebody there. Now, I mean, I think I wouldn't call it a foregone conclusion, but I think it's pretty high that they're going to get at least a center, maybe exactly who they want. And then who knows, maybe they make another move on the offensive line. I think it's a good time to be a Seahawks fan, because it's a new direction. And I think for us, you believe in this coaching staff, especially that gives you a little more confidence moving forward here.
The only thing for me that I'm concerned with is just the reports I'm seeing. Like, I don't think Drew Dahlman's coming to Seattle. I think he's going to end up in Chicago.
Right.
I think that's almost a foregone conclusion. I think Chicago has got the money. I think Seattle's going to have to pivot, and it's probably going to be a pivot to like Will Frias from the Colts.
Right.
Or Tevin Jenkins or somebody like that. They're going to have to pivot to. I don't think they're going to get the center they want. Maybe they get a Ryan Kelly. That's a potential. I think if they're going to address center, it may be in the draft with, a Seth McLaughlin or a Jake Majors type. I don't know if they're going to get the guy they want in free agency, because I just don't think Drew Dahlman's going to be available. I think now, maybe that's what all these moves were for, is to try and reconvince him by giving him more money, and they're going to have to overpay. But I don't know if that's what they're gonna do. I think the first domino that'll fall tomorrow morning will be something about the quarterback position. The second domino will be about the O-line.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm feeling too. The one thing that does irk me, though, with the way that this has gone, is this is now 2 straight quarterbacks in which they've been traded, and then the follow-up is, oh, great, we're not paying the quarterback, so now we can build the offensive line. Like, no, you've had time to build the offensive line while you were paying the quarterback, and Gino was hardly some unbelievably expensive option before trading him. And with Russ, remember all those years, it's like Russ has got to take a pay cut. He's got to do this, free up some cap space so that they can make a splash for an offensive lineman. And to me, like we've seen other top quarterbacks in this league land or have their front offices go after offensive linemen, whether through the draft or making big moves in free agency. So like, I know that Mahomes was still on his rookie deal or thereabouts, or like the early bits of his contract, but they lost the Super Bowl and then they go get Joe Thuney. And then, of course, they draft Creed Humphrey. So that's one example. And then Cincinnati, even though it hasn't worked out in terms of the actual signings, like they've made some things and they've missed. But for Seattle, when they had Russ on a cheaper deal during his first extension, they traded Unger away and then had Drew Nowak be the center on day one. And he's one of the single worst moves, I think, of the Schneider era. And then they spent money on Luke Jokel, and they called that good. Or they would start Glowinski, or they would have Odiyambo be a guard or a tackle. They bad offensive line picks in the draft, and then bad free agent signings like Bradley Sowell. And then with Geno, at least Cross and Lucas, I think, have been net positives when healthy. But the guard position has just been so bad. And it's been bad for Seattle for like 20 years now. Like James Carpenter being one of the best interior offensive linemen for Seattle since Hutchinson left is damning of two front offices, meaning Schneider and Tim Ruskell before him. So they really, absolutely, they, meaning Schneider in the front office, have to get this offensive line right. No more excuses now. You got the cap space. Whether you get a quarterback or not, you have the cap space. And it's not like he's incapable. It's not like he's flagrantly ignored the offensive line, building the O-line first and then getting the quarterback later. When he came here with Pete, first pick was Russell Okung. 2011, they picked Carpenter in the first round. They inherited Unger. So that was 3 starters out of 5 right away. And then they tried Robert Gallery, really bad signing, didn't work out. But the principle was there of trying to build the offensive line. And then they get Sweezy, who found one of the Tom Cable projects, and at least he worked out. And then they signed Giacomini. So 3 out of your 5 were at least significant investments. So when Russ came into the league, I know there were injuries with Okung and Carpenter and Unger at times, but they had the most expensive O-line in the league in 2013. It's just that they were never on the field. They were always injured. But they built the O-line before getting the long-term quarterback. So the only thing I could think of is something kind of similar where we don't know, even if they signed Darnold, if he's the long-term quarterback. But even if they sign him and draft a quarterback early in the first round or second round or third round, at least have the foundation of the offensive line in place. So when they make moves in free agency, no one-year deals for $5 million. Like, none of that. These have to be multi-year commitments to me, 2-3 seasons. I'm not asking for 6 or 7 or anything like that. I'm not asking for the Joe Thuney contract. I am asking for continuity on the offensive line for 2-3 seasons, as opposed to this constant revolving door that has, to me, hurt basically every Seahawks quarterback really for however many years since Walton Hunt were gone.
I mean, how much confidence do you have in Schneider? I mean, you just reel off a bunch of duds, and Bryson have had those same concerns, right? Like, that's the thing that we keep saying, like, this is such a crucial offseason for John, but how much confidence do you have to even get it right? Like, he's got a bunch of money to play with now. It's like everything we're thinking about is like, just don't screw it up. And it's hard to it's hard to put confidence in him, really. You think about it, and maybe that was part of why there were some people that didn't like the Geno Smith move, because you're like, okay, now what is he gonna do? Like, I just feel like there's a big lack of confidence with a lot of moves he's made over the years, and especially when you're talking offensive line. Like, you think, like, you're just like, man, we got all this money, we got this flexibility, but there's just no way that we can improve it. But then we're sitting here honestly thinking, like, will it not get better? I mean, really, what are your guys' confidence that this, Bryce, you just mentioned Dahlman, right? I mean, that might be out of Schneider's hands, but then it's like, okay, if that was the target potentially, like, what is he going to pivot to? And that's now gets a little shaky, right? Because like you mentioned, Mookie, like, you're trying to at least build this up, because if you bring a rook in, a young guy, you don't want him to get splattered. I like, for me, I like the Geno move, right? Because I think he is a replaceable guy. But what are you going to have in place for this offensive line and other things? So, yeah, what are your guys' confidence level? I mean, I know we've talked about it, but moving forward now with all this flexibility and money with that John has, what's the confidence level?
I'd say my confidence level in John 55-60% right now to get it right. Like there's part of me that thinks Mike McDonald is
Plays
going
a
to
role.
push him in certain directions that they need to go
Yeah.
that John may not have necessarily believed he needed to go before. It'll be interesting to say the least. The first thing for me, my confidence level will be very dictated on what I hear in the first 48 hours of what they're doing. That's really going to tell me a lot, because if it's just we're sitting pat and we're not doing anything, and you went and made all these moves and there's no like we're jumping in and getting somebody quick, I'm going to question a lot, because you can't turn around and say, oh yeah, well, we got all these picks, so that's how we're going to redo this. Like, you haven't had a high success rate, and I get we've got these new coaches in, but I still don't see the success rate there. Like, it's the same thing, and I will always go back to this, is what Mike Holmgren said his biggest mistakes were in Seattle was drafting offense, spending on older defensive players. And he said that was my biggest mistake as a GM. You need to flip that. You need to spend the money on your offense, especially in your trenches, and you go young on defense.
Yeah.
You look at when Seattle won their Super Bowl, their O-line was built through guys, besides James Carpenter and Okun, who was their first overall pick. Unger was already there, but you had Paul McQuiston, you had, J.R. Sweezy, you had Giamatti. You had a high expensive offensive line you were paying. It wasn't cheap. But guess what? On the other side of the ball, all those guys in the LOB and stuff, at that point, they were still cheap. Mm-hmm. That whole defense wasn't a lot of money, wasn't allocated to that defense, but they were all playing hard. That's where you need to go with this. You've got your defense in place. Now spend the money on the offense to kind of kickstart this in the right direction.
Yeah, someone just said in the comments real quick, they're like, the O-line can't get much worse. But the problem is it kind of can if you blow a bunch of money at the wrong pieces, right? Like that's what we're concerned about, because it's like this is your opportunity to get this in the right direction, that for years it's been so bad that now you got rid of your primetime receiver, you got rid of your quarterback, you freed up all this money, Tyler's off the books, like get it right. And that's, to me, like if it stays the same, but you spend in the wrong places like he has in the past, that would become really, really depressing. And then I also think that could be close to the end of his tenure as well.
Yeah, as far as my confidence level in Schneider fixing this offensive line, it's not high based on body of work, but there's going to be more input from McDonald, and therefore input from his coaching staff, which will include John Benton and Kubiak. So we have kind of had a hard time decoupling John and Pete, and as far as what moves are John's moves, what moves are Pete's moves, most likely they've been in lockstep with just about everything. But with a different coach, I feel like this is going to be a slightly different approach, I would like to think, as far as their philosophy with the offensive line. Doesn't mean it'll work. It just means it'll be something different. I am begging them to take swings on the offensive line, because historically, when they have taken big swings on offense, it's been for skill position players. It means taking a big swing on Percy Harvin on while Russ is on his rookie deal, and it didn't work out, cost him a first-round pick. Or taking a swing, trading Unger away to get Jimmy Graham, also costing you a first-round pick. And so I think he was better than fans remember him, but still, I don't think it was as great as it could have been. Injuries and all that. So they've made big moves at wide receiver and a tight end. But when it comes to the trenches, they've generally tried to take the big swings on defense, meaning Leonard Williams, or drafting Malik McDowell in the second round. Then he has his ATV accident. So they panic their way into trading another second for Sheldon Richardson and give up Jermaine Kearse in the process. Or they even when it's not the trenches, they're willing to spend 2 firsts on Jamal Adams to try and help fix their pass rush, because they did such a bad job of finding edge rushers. So they've been willing to take swings, I think, to me, more on the defensive side of the ball, as opposed to just strictly the offensive line. The biggest swing they have taken in terms of getting an established player in recent times is the Gabe Jackson trade, because they gave up a 4th round pick for Gabe. They extended his contract 3 years. He didn't make it past year 2. And it turns out he was on the other side of 30 and wasn't great. My argument for getting some established offensive linemen in free agency is as simple as it is really, really, really hard. And there's a big learning curve for offensive linemen on their rookie deals. So if they draft a guard or if they draft a center, you cannot reasonably expect them to turn into Robbie Tobeck and Steve Hutchinson over the first few weeks of the season. You're going to have some screw-ups. You're going to have some issues. And I would like to thank Howard for correcting me. The big swing was Dwayne Brown. The other big swing would be Dwayne Brown 2017. That was also a forced swing. I mean, they had no choice because they wanted to start George Fant at left tackle. He blows out his ACL in preseason, and they spend the first half of the year so unserious with Odiambo and whoever else was starting at left tackle that they had to make a move or else the season was going to go down the tubes. It went down the tubes anyway, but Dwayne Brown ended up hanging around for a few seasons, and he ended up being, I believe, the last all-pro selection for Seattle on the offensive line. So, yeah, to get some free agent options, and the focus is clearly on the interior. If you believe in Abe Lucas, and I don't know if you've seen the videos yet of Abe moving around, I mean, that's encouraging in itself. Do you believe in Charles Cross? You got your bookend tackles at least for this year. Interior line, you got to fix it. Doesn't mean give up on the guys you drafted like Lomea and Christian Haynes. Okay, maybe Anthony Bradford's a different story, and we have hardly mentioned him for like several episodes now, but like, even if you move on from Bradford, you still have guys you want to develop. Sundell, others, Olawatimi, etc. But just do something different. If it doesn't work out, then at least you went down swinging a different way as opposed to just trying to bunt your way into a better position over and over again, and usually you're out at first.
Yeah, real quick, just I agree with all of that. Getting back to the DK thing, guys, like, do you think there was a chance now? I know we heard like there was some optimism about, maybe being able to retain him after the trade request, after Gino's gone, with the rumors about the chemistry and not liking each other the greatest. And Mookie, you brought up the point before we came on that that happens a lot in football. Look at AJ Brown and Hurts. Like, receiver's a diva position, right? Like, it's like I'm pretty much open every single play, right? But do you think there was any chance of retaining him, or do you think that the Hawks even tried after the request, or do you think it was a matter of like DK was just, nah, I'm done? Have you guys heard anything? Was it just like did it come down strictly to a money thing and they were just so far apart, or was it just, hey, I want to change the scenery, get me out of here?
Bryce, you want to take that on? Because we both have heard different things, but yeah.
Yeah, like the DK side of things, from what I've heard, it's not so much the Gino side of it, him and not getting along. Like Mookie said, that shit happens. I think for DK, it was very much about money, feeling like he was going to get his payday that he felt he finally deserved. And I think part of it was he thinks this team's maybe in more of a rebuild than he's willing to go through. Like he wants to go and win. I don't know if the Steelers are exactly the contender, but he must have viewed so to sign the contract and say he wanted to go there. Like I had heard today earlier that the Panthers were involved in this as well. And, those are kind of the things I've been hearing. So I don't know if they got back to the table and started talking again after Gino was traded. But I think it was pretty set once he said I was out. I was out.
Yeah, it was kind of a situation where the minute the trade request happened, that this was not a I'm going to come back situation. There was always going to be a market for Metcalf because the free agent class for wide receiver is not great. I mean, Devontae Adams just got signed by the Rams, annoyingly. But after that, like Godwin could easily re-sign with Tampa Bay, and he's coming off a serious injury. And then the other names like Darius Slayton and I think Valdez Scantling's a free agent, Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs. They're either like very, very limited receivers who are not going to command big paydays, or they're guys on the wrong side of 30 who probably have seen their best days pass them by already. So with DK, he's in his prime. He could still have his best years ahead of him, especially in a specific offense. So we'll see what Pittsburgh does at quarterback. But I think that there was kind of a where there's smoke, there's fire thing from what we were hearing at the combine. So please, anybody listening or watching, do not blame Corbin Smith for engineering a DK Metcalf trade to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Turns out it wasn't DK to the Packers, but the principle was right, that there were teams interested, including Green Bay, and that Seattle wasn't willing to pay DK north of $30 million a year, or even $30 million a year. And maybe Metcalf was aware of Geno's future, whether he had chemistry issues or not. And if there is a situation where the Seahawks offense is in flux, do you really want to be a part of learning another new system? I mean, think about it. DK got in the league in 2019. This is already going to be his fourth different offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And now it definitely is because he's going to be in Pittsburgh, but you get the idea. It would have been his fourth offensive coordinator in Seattle in 7 seasons. And even if they had kept DK and traded Geno, it would have been on his third quarterback. So there is that report from Diana Rossini about the stability. I think there is some kernel of truth there where he wants to be in. If there's the Steelers are a very stable organization. Doesn't mean that they are any bit better than Seattle in terms of the recent results. They're just like middling plus, where they're middling in the way of making the playoffs most of the time and then getting absolutely drilled in the wild card round. But they're at least they're usually in the playoff hunt. Whereas, Seattle has had some seasons like 2021 where they were out of it pretty quickly, and other times they've had to claw their way to even make it to the final week. So yeah, I think that the Metcalf bridge got pretty much closed off the moment that the trade request was made. And hey, we've been through this before in history with Joey Galloway a couple of decades, I guess in the late 90s. So we're going through this all over again. And it means that we only have 3 receivers on the roster right now. And that's Jake Bobo, Derek Young, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. And yeah, they're going to be having to rebuild this receiving group really fast. And it depends on their direction philosophy, whether they want to rebuild primarily through free agency or rebuild primarily through the draft. Because if it were up to me, I think that they are going to rebuild primarily through the draft at receiver.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think it's one of those things too, when you look at Pittsburgh, he could maybe look at that and say, hey, like, I'm that missing piece. They're a stable organization. Mike Tomlin teaming up with George Pickens, like, I just needed a fresh start here. I want to get out. So, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's get into a few Q&As, guys. We're not going to hang out long, but we want to jump on here because this is, obviously huge news. Our primetime guy for the last, few years here, and polarizing guy. So it's a big deal, and coming right off the Geno Smith thing. So yeah, Bryce, let's get into a few Q&As. You got a couple popped up real quick. Filipino Mad, brand new member of the channel. Appreciate that. Guys, there's some cool things with the membership program. Check that out. 12 is 1 strong. Yeah. Hey, you got to be, right? Because, you're a Seahawk fan right now, guys. You can look at it 2 ways. I think we're looking at it with some optimism. It's like guys throw it out there. Hey, what happened? Tyler, DK, Geno, like the world's crashing. It's gone. It's done. And but then you look at this offense and what we've done. And Bryce, and Mookie, you bring up middling. You can't middle anymore, man. That's our biggest nightmare. So, if we take some steps back, or maybe we don't, but I just want to try something different. So that's why I'm optimistic, man. Bryce, you got a few more queued up here? Or?
Yeah, I got this one here. 3D tables. Feels like this was kind of forced by the players wanting to get traded and not what the front office actually wanted to do. I agree. From what I've heard, this wasn't hey, we're going into this offseason to trade DK Metcalf and Geno Smith.
Right.
The Tyler thing was more predetermined, that they kind of knew that was coming. This was very much, Geno, when they gave Geno the 2-year deal that they did slide across the table, it was for good money. It wasn't for nothing. But Geno turned around and said nope, and didn't even counteroffer, according to Bob Condotta. Like, there's sources, and I've had people tell me the same thing. Like, there was no counteroffer from Geno going, oh, I want it structured this way. It was like, nope, discussions over, and let's find the trade partner for Geno Smith. Like, he wants to go to Vegas, and then basically working out the compensation on it. And DK was very much the same thing. DK just wanted out of the situation.
Do you think there was just both both sides had hard numbers, like line drawn in the sand. Like we talk about, here's our line. Gino had his line. Like, no, I want the 45. We're not close. Get me out.
I think there was, again, I think with Gino, and I said this on Dan's show, Mookie was on there as well, that Gino, if Pete Carroll hadn't come back into the NFL, Geno Smith's still on the Seattle Seahawks probably. But because Pete came back and Pete's the guy for Gino and his biggest advocate, Gino wanted to go. I just, I look at it and I think this in some way, right now it looks scary to a lot of people. I think in the hindsight of it all, I think we may look back if John Schneider does the right things and say that this reset the Seahawks in the right direction overall. I see a really good one in here from Wes that I really enjoyed. Gino's agent didn't write back. That's quite well done. I will give you that, Wes. That is really well done.
Well, you got to think about how, I think his agent went in there thinking like, hey, listen, and we brought this up. You look at the free agent market, you look at the draft market. He feels like we got the leverage here. Like, even though there might not be the biggest market for my client, if any year I can try to get these guys at this number. So it's 45 mil, take it or leave it. Oh, and by the way, Pete Carroll's back in the NFL, so he'll take them, So I just think you look at it like that if I don't know what you guys think, but if it was a better free agent market and a deeper draft, then maybe, and Pete Carroll's not in there because by all accounts, it doesn't seem like there was much of a market for Gino either. But for Pete and the Raiders, for as bad as they've been, and you get Pete some stability, it makes sense, and it'd just be funny if the Raiders are like an 8-9 team and that happens for the next few years. But anyways,
the other thing that's interesting about the timing of all this and this particular offseason, and this is just one thing I'll say that I think is kind of interesting, is the NFC West is very much in flux. There's no real true dominant team in the NFC West, and you're not in an arms race really with anybody. Like, it's not back like in 2012 and 2013 where there was the arms race with the 49ers to see whoever was the best that could get home field advantage, because that meant that you got the NFC Championship game most likely to go to the Super Bowl. The NFC West, the NFC as an entire conference is very much in kind of almost a middling state. The AFC has a lot of the powers. Yes, I get the Eagles won the Super Bowl this year. The Eagles currently are the power in the NFC. Detroit's going through some stuff. They're going to have to redo their whole coaching staff, which isn't going to be easy. The Bears are trying to load up with all the talent they've got there. The Packers are trying to reassemble. Like, you've got a lot of these teams that are all in this kind of state of flux of repositioning their organizational direction. So I think John Schneider might have looked at it and said, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to rip this Band-Aid off, it has to be this offseason for me to recorrect this and see if we can get a jump start going in the right direction, even into this season. I don't think Seattle's going to go and be a 4-win football team. The defense is too good, in my opinion. There's still enough talent. I think they will add talent. But I'd rather be 10-7 or 9-8 with a younger quarterback, an improved O-line, and things going in the right direction that way and winning games in a way that we couldn't before, than keep doing the same thing and never getting any closer. Because if you do it this way and you get the young quarterback and you do some of these things that you need to do to reset this, 2026, we may be talking about, hey, the Seahawks are a 12-win football team and winning the NFC West and getting a home playoff game again and doing some of those things to reinvigorate this fan base more than just staying with the status quo because it's comfortable.
Mookie, I want to throw this out to you because Bryce, you bring up, I'd rather be 10-7 with a young QB. And I agree with you 100%, man, completely. But I'll throw this out to you, Mookie, because you've heard, I've heard from some people that, know what they're talking about in football and stuff like that. They look and be like, man, what are the Seahawks doing? We just had a 10-7 season. The NFC West is wide open. Like, what is Schneider? What an idiot. Like, we could easily become a 12-win team if we were 2 guards away. I've seen that on Twitter. I've read, I'm not naming names, but you look at that and say, you got to look at this football team and what it is. Like, you can, sure, great, wins are hard in the NFL, but we all know, man, this team was not set up and not really, I don't think they were a guard away from really making a long run, in my opinion. So you can talk about, well, we squeak in the playoffs and the old adage of anything can happen in the playoffs. Well, sure, but in reality, what's more than likely going to happen with the way this roster was set up? So real quick, touch on that, because you've heard that, you've read that, like we're 10-7 and we just got rid of like a bunch of our guys on offense. Like we are in rebuild mode. What is he thinking? What is your, when you hear stuff like that, is that knee jerk, or is that people believing like, hey, we are just a tweak here and a tweak their way? Because we've brought that up. Like, is this what John Schneider thinks? Because he's done that before. Hey, we're just a tweak here and a tweak there. We'll throw in a Lakin and hope that works out and get to 12. But they completely didn't do this, and that's where I'm applauding them. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so not all 10-7s are created equally. And I wrote about this after the Bears game, I think. So, and what a classic that was. But Seattle just has not beaten good teams consistently in the Geno, and frankly, for a good while. That includes the last couple of Russ seasons, so that I'm not putting it all on Geno. So I'm looking at from StatHead, of the teams that have played and beaten opposition below a win percentage of 400. So like a sub 400 team, Seattle's got 24 wins since 2020 against sub 400 teams. So 24-5 is their record. Only the Dolphins have more wins, and everybody has watched Miami the last few years and realized they're a complete paper tiger every season. And then in that same time frame, against eventual division champions, so I'm going to include the Rams in there and that kind of meaningless final game, they're 4-17. So when they have had to play like actual contenders, not only have they lost, they've also gotten drilled. I mean, they've had chances. The Packers game was an embarrassment. The Bills game, they were absolutely thrashing. Those games were both at home. They had a competitive loss against the Vikings, and that was pretty cool. But how many times have you seen over the last several seasons, even again, going back to the last great Russ season, they play Buffalo and get absolutely shellacked, give up 44 points and like 500 yards of offense. Or in 2023, they're 5-2. They get to play the Baltimore Ravens. They lose 37-3. And Geno gets 2 turnovers and the defense gets absolutely annihilated. Or they give up 500 yards of offense again against the 49ers, or they give up, 30 points on Thanksgiving night. The teams that they have beaten are generally not good. And yeah, you want them to be beating the not good teams, but they're not beating the actual good teams consistently enough. And more often than not, they're not competitive. So there is a hang up there, and you're not going to have like that kind of favorable scheduling all the time. There are going to be years where you're going to be playing an absolute gauntlet. And in this case, Seattle had some tough teams to play, like Buffalo and like Green Bay and like the entire NFC North. And the end result was, they lost all of them pretty much. So I wrote at the end of the last season that they were encouragingly mediocre, which means that they were mediocre in a different way. The offense got worse. The defense got better. The special teams functionally got worse, but really it wasn't the kicking as much as it was the return game. So if you take a different path to the same result, you're still mediocre. So this is just trying to avoid taking another path to mediocrity and instead find a different path on your GPS to something great. And this comes with risk, of course, because unfortunately, I think a lot of Seahawks fans have grown up with the Legion of Boom and only the Legion of Boom. So they don't remember even the Jim Morris season, where they were so capped out on talent and they were pretty much jabbing at each other that they collapsed to 5-11. Mora had to be fired even after one season. Like, we have seen some really bad Seahawks teams, whether in the 1990s or the last homegrown year, the Jim Mora year. That could happen this year, but I don't anticipate it. I don't think this is a talent-starved team as a whole. It became a talent-starved offense because of who we ended up getting rid of. But if we believe this defense is on the rise, if they're on the ascension, then their floor should still be respectable. It's just a matter of getting the offense right. And I guess that sort of change was kind of necessary. And this is going to be, it's going to be a really intriguing offseason as far as not just free agency now, but this totally changes how the draft looks. Like, we were thinking like, okay, you got to deal with the offensive line, but now you got to look at the offensive line, quarterback and wide receiver, almost regardless of what they do in free agency.
Yeah, I want to just bring this up. I saw this, obviously, Niners fan in the chat, Reclamation Project, Niners loving this madness. Hey, man, like, I'll just say this. Niners got a ton of their own issues going on. Like, you're about to sign Brock Purdy to some ridiculous deal and losing everybody's CMC. So you know what? I mean, you got to worry about your own guys because you know what? He has so many issues over there that you've peaked out, and I think that you signed Purdy. You might be middling for quite some time. So
Josh Allen just got paid $55 million a year. So as far as I'm concerned, Brock Purdy been to a Super Bowl. Josh Allen, no Super Bowls. Drag that thing up to $60 million.
Hey, give him 70.
Yeah, absolutely. Last pick of the draft, like that's the ultimate rags to riches. But
because you got to look at it. He went against Patty Mahomes too, right? So you got to look at it like that was a tough opponent. So I'd be in favor of giving Purdy 70. But and then boys, WTF? You know what? Don't worry, we got a long way to go. The offseason just started, guys. It really did. There's been so many things happening. It feels like, honestly, doesn't it feel like we've been in the offseason now for quite a while? But
we got to have a head start on offseason.
Yeah, my gosh, have we ever? Holy.
Well, I mean, we really hit it off within less than 24 hours after our last game, we made a move. Right? Ryan Grubb out the door.
Grubb got fired. So there's been significant changes. The pattern has been the same with Schneider, except for 2011. When they don't make the playoffs, people lose their jobs. So 2017, Bevel, Richard, Cable, they all got canned. They cut Sherman. They traded Bennett. 2021, they missed the playoffs. They trade Russ. And then they
Solari's out.
Shoddy
was out.
Shoddy was out after 2020. So they made the playoffs but didn't win a playoff game. But they fired Norton at the end of 2021. And then they missed the playoffs in 2023. Pete goes. Pretty much his entire coaching staff goes. And now we're in 2024. It cost Gino his job, and then traded DK away. And now Grubb is gone. Huff is gone. A good portion of the offensive side of the coaching staff is gone. John is the constant here. And all eyes are on him, to me, more than McDonald. I mean, we're going to learn a lot about McDonald and his coaching abilities, having to deal with a considerably new roster on the offensive side of the ball pretty soon. But this is John's team. It's John's hire as far as the head coach. It's John's roster all the way. You've got 2 years left on your contract, I believe, until the 2027 NFL draft. So is this a 2-year plan? Is 2025 a potential step back and 2026 becomes the year to gear up for contention again? Or is this 2025 just we're going to try and find a different way to contend, still be a competitive team, still push for the playoffs? Because as you said, NFC West is in flux. I know the Rams would be prohibitive favorites right now, but Stafford is in his deep 30s with a pretty significant injury history. That arm of his and his health, if he starts to show his age, then the Rams become a lot less potent. I don't care how great their defensive roster looks right now.
Oh, Devontae Adams signing too.
Yeah, I mean, that changes a lot of things. 49ers, who knows what's going to happen there. Arizona's a wild card because they were a lot better than we thought, and they were 8-9. So they could be on the rise too. It's kind of a shit or get off the pot moment for Kyler Murray. So NFC West is going to be changing quite a bit this year, and I just want the division to be as terrible as it was during the Hasselbeck years. Because
7-9, get in there.
Gino, I said the other day, Gino was kind of a victim of not being on those Hasselbeck era teams where he got that elite offensive line, elite running back, all that stuff. Well, the Hasselbeck years, they also got to play in a really crummy division where they got a minimum 4 free wins every season. They got to win the division at 9-7 twice and at 7-9 once. And then they made the playoffs at 10-6, I think in 2007. And in 2005, they were 13-3, and everybody else in that division lost at least 10 games, I believe. So I just want my enemies to suffer, whereas Seattle doesn't have to be in the cellar forever. And yes, some were there in the 70s too. Yeah, that's well before all of that. For us, that's before our time. But
very much so.
Hey, I got to mention too that you got to look at it too going in the draft, Bryce. I mean, now we are as far as the top 100 picks are concerned, man, we're beefing it up. We're loading up. I think we got the most picks in the top 100, right? So, again, another weapon, if you want to call it, that Schneider has to work with this offseason. There's a lot of things that if it's mapped out right can play in our favor. That it's the NFL, man. This is not long-term plan in the NFL is not as long as some other sports. I mean, it's just
the
not.
NFL,
So
not for long.
Not for long. So you
your
can,
increments.
You can turn this thing around people like I think when people put out that word rebuild, I mean, I just think you got to slow down a bit because there's really no indication of that. We just signed, if anyone missed it, they just signed Jaron Reed and Ernest Jones today on that defense. So to me, you're rebuilding. You're not just, you're not offering Ernest Jones and especially Jaron Reed new contracts, both 3-year deals. So I just think that I don't see that happening. Maybe they don't contend for a NFC championship in 25, but I think there's probably this at least 2-year plan, 2 to 3. So we'll see. Like, we can't get it all the next year. And I think the danger is that, you want to stay competitive, and sometimes that just turns into middling. You brought up the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I get it. Mike Tomlin, great coach. He's been there for a while, but sometimes you think he's fallen into that Pete Carroll territory where he's been there so long, and they have been middling for a long, long time. So where do you want to be as a fan? Some fans don't mind taking that step back as long as you believe in the organization. You might have to have one of those years. Look, we're not the Browns. Like, that's not our organization. I think people have to realize that. Like, you look at the organizations that do it right, and like you look at Detroit, they got a huge culture change. But for years under like Matt Millen and all those, like it was a disaster there. But that started from the top in the organization. So we're not that. So I see a retool. I see them trying to maybe focus on the defense and really beefing that up. There's just, honestly, guys, it's anyone's guess right now because we have so much things in front of us with the free agency and draft. I mean, this roster could look completely different, and it will on the offensive side. But so what do you guys think? Anything else? Closing thoughts? A couple more keys. I mean, this was just coming on here. DK, like, Steeler, Gino's gone, Tyler's gone. I'm optimistic. I'm just things to come, man. It's again awesome time of the year. Mookie, probably see you tomorrow night or something, or
yeah, that's right. I was going to say that with Pickens and Metcalf on the same team, I don't know how long that's going to last, because that feels like a ticking time bomb waiting to happen.
Must see TV.
I wouldn't be shocked if Pickens gets dealt, to be honest with you, because he's.
I do. I think he's going to end up in New England. I think New England will pivot to George Pickens now to give themselves some young receiver for Drake May.
Yeah, and on the topic of trading, we're on the assumption that Seattle's going to use all these picks just on draft choices. Who is to say that they don't make a splash move using one of their second-round picks to get an established player or something, or somebody who can help them win on the offensive side of the ball? Trade for an offensive lineman with one of your seconds, or package both of your seconds to get a first-round pick, move up in the draft. I'm pretty confident that Seattle is going to be drafting a quarterback this year. But as far as what they do with their other draft picks, I don't rule out them trying to get players via the trade market, as opposed to just focusing on the free agent market. The whole board is wide open now in ways that it hasn't been for the Seahawks in a long time. Not since the first couple of years of Pete and John, where they were just having to redo that roster because it really sucked, and they had to make some unpopular moves. We've been fans long enough to be pissed off when Darryl Tapp got traded. Field goals went nuclear that day when we traded Darryl Tapp for Chris Clemens, and Chris Clemens ended up being an important part of Seattle's formative years and their eventual Super Bowl run. Likewise, trading Josh Wilson, our favorite nickel corner, for I don't even remember whom, but they made some unpopular moves to get better in the long run. I'm not saying that that's going to be a complete copy and paste of what we're going to see now, but it does give me 2010, 2011 vibes, but with a better roster. I'm just glad that the defense improved enough to give us hope on that side of the ball, so we're not all going stir crazy like, oh my God, this is going to be the worst team in the league or whatever. I don't think they're going to be that. If they are, and the defense regresses and the offense stinks and they make all the wrong moves, see you later, John, and Mike's going to be on the hot seat. But I don't think it'll get to that level. And for anybody rooting for a 2-win, 3-win seasons, a tank for Arch Manning or Nussmeier or Drew Allar, like, please be real with yourselves. These are human beings. They don't like losing as much as you don't like losing. And we've got a lot of guys who are on rookie contracts who have big deals due soon. So I don't want to just waste a year of their abilities just to flagrantly lose for a quarterback. So I don't want to be that way. And know your history, people. The best quarterbacks in franchise history for the Seahawks, not one of them is a first-round pick. The closest first-rounder is swapping first with for Hasselbeck. Like, that's it. The actual players themselves never had to tank for a first-rounder. But I do know that they've wasted first-rounders on Rick Meyer and Dan McGuire. So there are multiple ways to get your franchise quarterback, everybody. Just calm down. Yeah, that's the preferred way. I get it. It's the sexy way. But there are multiple ways, as history has shown us.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all shapes up. But you know what? At this rate, everyone, make sure you've got the notification button clicked, because we may be going live at any point, as we've proven over the last five days.
Yeah, no, it's, like we said, awesome time of the year. We love this time of the year. We didn't expect it to be this crazy, this quick, but here we are. So, guys, appreciate everyone in the comments, throwing down, tuning in. A lot of people watching the stream. We appreciate that. Anybody that hasn't subbed to the channel, go down, hit the sub button. Helps out the channel. And share the videos, like the videos. We're going to see you guys really soon. Like we said, we got some cool stuff coming up. Scheduled podcasts coming up next week. So those will definitely be, we know when we're coming on for those, but like I said, I mean, I just think we're going to be super busy coming up here. So we'll see, we'll see you guys on another emergency pod pretty quick here. So that's it for us. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.